so I don't know. Okay. So, and so again, check in here. This is what we're gonna go over, mostly focusing on the preview and the Casper today, which I'm sure you're somewhat familiar with, or at least have heard about. I will definitely leave room for questions at the end, but as we go, if you are having questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat or raise your hand, and we can answer as we go as well. All right. So, as I mentioned, we're going to focus on the AAMC preview and Casper. We're going to talk about why they exist, how they're used, and when to take them. And so we will kind of get started with an overview. So, situational judgment tests are used by not only medical schools, but actually they're used by PA programs, nursing schools, other graduate schools as well. So you may hear from peers or friends that they're being asked to take a Casper test for their graduate program. So they do exist outside of our bubble as well. And they're meant to assess social intelligence and professionalism. So they're very different from entrance exams like the MCAT and DAT that are assessing content. And we'll look at kind of what they are assessing more specifically. So they're really looking at your soft skills. So if we look at these professional competencies, we can kind of see an outline of what they're hoping to get out of these types of tests, right? So things like empathy and compassion, ethics and fairness, collaboration, communication, problem solving, etc. So those are the things that they are looking for in these types of tests. And they're part of the process, the application process. So as you've heard before, the application process for both med and dental school, it's a holistic process, right? So they have lots of different factors they are considering, and this is just one of those factors, right? So um, they help in that process by assessing the characteristics of a physician that can't be measured in other ways, right? So certainly on the MCAT, they're not able to tell what type of person you are, right, socially or ethically. And so this will give them a sense of that side of you. The other thing it can do is, you know, we can talk about this more later, but sometimes schools will recommend but not require one of the tests, right? But for those of you that may want to give yourself a little bump up, they can help you in the process. So oftentimes our students do well on these types of tests. And so to show admissions folks just another, strong side of you, you may want to think about taking one of them. Um, and that's what we're talking about in number three. So if you're someone who has a little bit of lower numbers maybe on the MCAT or GPA wise, this test could be helpful in showing your capabilities in terms of working with others and personality and things like that, as we mentioned. Okay. And currently, so most schools do not use a situational judgment test to screen out. So they're only used at this point as an add-on, right? So either schools don't use them, right? Or they use them as a plus. They wouldn't use it against you, if that makes sense. Okay. So we can talk a little bit about timeline. So when should you do this is a very common question, right? So we basically say take them by June, okay? So you don't have to take them right away. And for a lot of you, I know that you're kind of in the thick of it with in the admissions application stuff that's going on right now, right? So a lot of you are going to be completing your application for an MPAC advisor, right, with your self-assessment, and that's all going on right now, as well as everything else. Maybe you're studying for the MCAT. So pick a time frame that works well for you, knowing that you do have a while to take these and that you could take it in June after you've submitted your primary application, and they would still get to admissions folks in time for them to take a look at your scores. With that said, June is the most popular time across the country for people to take them. So if you do want to take it in June, I would just make sure you register early and secure your spot, I guess, so that you're getting the date that you want. But we'll talk more about registration. But you can take it before then if you feel like you have the capacity at the time. Certainly you can take it, anytime until June as well. Any questions about that? Okay. All right, so let's dig into the preview. So the preview's through the AAMC. And so this is designed to assess professional readiness, right? Professionalism, as well as social skills. And I wanted to start by sharing with you a couple of resources. So this is a great one to register and attend. And if you scan the QR code at the bottom, you should be able to access this exact page. But this is going to be a webinar for folks taking the exam in terms of how to prepare. And we'll talk a little bit about that today, but this is coming straight from the folks at the AAMC. So I think this could be really helpful to attend if possible. And hopefully they will record as well. So if you register, they would send you the recording. So just kind of a tip to sign up for that if possible. Registration for the preview opens as they have it posted now on or before March 1. So this kind of aligns with the registration should be open by then, and they'll be able to give you a little bit more information on that as well as test prep. So another slide with resources. So there is plenty of stuff that the AAMC puts out there for you all to, use in the preparation for these tests. So again, a QR code you can scan, which links you to a couple of their resources, which I have kind of screenshotted below as well. And we'll talk about preparing for the tests themselves, but they do have free preparation products, and we recommend you use the free products from the AAMC, and that's true for Casper as well, that rather than feeling like you need to purchase additional resources from a third party, I would stick with kind of the free resources they have, and there is some links to those as well. Okay. So both actually the Casper and the preview you take from home, right? So they call it a remote live proctored exam. So you still have to register for a date and time, right? But you will do it at your home computer. And once you register, they will let you know like all of the tech that you have to have set up and ready for these exams. And so they do a good job of preparing you for that and setting up your exam space. But just so you know, this isn't an exam where you need to go anywhere for it. You can take it on any home computer. Okay, and the preview is set up differently than the Casper, quite a bit differently actually. So for the preview, there's 30 scenarios and 186 multiple choice questions. So you have 75 minutes to complete this test. So it's not long in comparison to the MCAT, right? So it's a short chunk of time. And what they do is they give you a series of hypothetical scenarios that you may encounter in a medical setting, so typically in medical school. And then it will be like a conflict or a dilemma, and then it will ask you to rate the effectiveness of response. And we will look at some samples, but it's essentially like a multiple choice type test versus what you'll see when we talk about the Casper. And then there's a scoring scale from 1 to 9, with 9 being the highest, essentially. Okay, so I'm gonna just do a brief, it's a 1-minute video from the AAMC on kind of like what the test format looks like. Just so you know, there's a lot of these videos. If you go to AAMC preview test, you can watch quite a lot of helpful videos, and this is just like a snippet of that. So hopefully it will play for us. Let's see. And we can hear that, right? Thumbs up. Okay, cool.
Using the preview exam, we assess these competencies through a series of scenarios and responses. You have 75 minutes to complete the exam, which will be remote proctored. You will provide 186 responses to the scenarios which each present a situation, a conflict, or dilemma that medical students may encounter during medical school. The responses present the examinee with possible actions someone might take in response to this scenario. And your task as the test taker is to evaluate each response's level of effectiveness using a 4-point effectiveness scale. You are asked not to rate them based on what you would do personally, but how effectively the responses presented address the situation.
Okay. So hopefully that gives you kind of an overview. And then so we'll look at like another question more closely. And then we'll look at the next one, we'll look at like has answers included. But so this would be an example of a test question you would get. So scenario 27 out of 31. And so you can take a minute to kind of read that scenario. Um, and then underneath you can see like what it's going to look like in terms of how you have to respond. So as she mentioned, it's based on kind of what you feel like each numbered response, right? How effective those would be in each situation. Does the format itself kind of make sense in how you're going to be seeing these questions? Okay. So let's look at another sample, and you can definitely, we'll share this presentation if you want to go back, but kind of we'll just do this one together. Okay. So here is another scenario. So the scenario is at the top, right? So you're pursuing a 2-week volunteer opportunity at a well-regarded local clinic. When you receive your course schedule, you realize the volunteer opportunity would conflict with your weekly lab, and you're a medical school student at this point. This is the only time that the lab is offered for the semester, so you are not able to make up the lab. Participation in the lab will count towards a grade. Please rate the effectiveness of each response, right? And so highlighted here are kind of what a preferred answer would look like for each. So for example, if you skip your lab for 2 weeks, right, to attend a volunteer opportunity, that's very ineffective, right? So that seems pretty straightforward, right? Like we don't want to just skip our lab to go to the volunteer opportunity. And then something that would be very effective would be number 5 here, which is attend a lab and investigate if similar volunteer opportunities are available at another time. And then we have kind of the in between where some are, ineffective, but maybe not very ineffective, and so forth. Questions about that and how it's kind of like structured and outlined. It's pretty straightforward, and you can see how like you would, your response to this wouldn't be something you necessarily would have to like study for, right? Like you would an MCAT or a DAT exam, but it's more about how you feel like folks should respond in a situation. Questions?
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Um, do you get like, are your scores on it? You got it right, you got it wrong, or is it more like a scale?
It's more like a scale. I think I have a slide on scoring. So let me pull back a little, but that's a good question. Um if I don't, I know that there is another AAMC video on scoring, so we can pull that up. Um so let me just take a moment here to help you pull that up here. Um so can you see my YouTube? That's just holler at me if like I'm seeing something you're not seeing. But this is going to talk, this is talks about how scores are used. Let's do this one, and then if that doesn't answer our question, we'll do one more because these are helpful and they're short.
Schools review applicants holistically, considering all the information in an application to help them understand an applicant's readiness both academically and professionally. Preview scores are among the pieces of information they use to understand an applicant's understanding of the professional competencies. Many schools view preview scores as a plus factor, meaning applicants have been able to use their scores to strengthen their application. Some schools have also used scores early in the screening process to determine who they will invite for interviews. A question we are receiving more and more of is whether or not schools that require the exam will consider an application complete if a preview score is not available. This will depend on the school, as some schools will require the score before they would begin the review, and we found others would complete the initial screen, but not review a secondary application without a score. This is anecdotal, so it is important for you to get clarification directly from the schools you are applying to regarding their requirements.
Okay, helpful information, but didn't answer your question. But I know there is one on there. So that's how they use it, which we talked a little bit about before. Okay. Look at all these videos we don't want to watch. We just want the AAMC ones. And there is a lot of like outside information, and some of it is actually even like incorrect. So I would be careful what if you do like Google this stuff because it's not all right. I'm gonna send myself the correct one. But that's a good question. I just want to make sure we're clear. Okay. So let me stop screen sharing for just 1 second. And I will pull up the right one for you here. Okay. And then we'll screen share again.
So before we move on to the practice material available to you, I want to share how the exam is scored. Full and partial credit can be awarded for every question. I want to explain how this works. So each item has a key. If your response matches that key, full credit is awarded. If the response is one rating away from the key and on the same side of the scale, half credit is awarded. So this is confusing, so let's walk through an example. In this example, the arrow points to the key. So the key says that the full credit answer to this question is effective. And that would earn you full credit to this question. However, the test taker selected very effective. So since very effective is one rating away from effective, and because it's on the same side of the scale, half credit would be awarded. If the test taker in this scenario selected ineffective, which is also just one away from effective, but it's on the other side of the scale, that one would not receive any credit because it's on the other side. So again, if the key says it's effective and you put very effective, you're going to get partial credit. But if that key says effective and you pick ineffective, you will not get any credit for that question. And this goes the other way. If the key for this was ineffective and you chose very effective, you would get partial credit. Excuse me, if it was ineffective and you chose very ineffective, you would get partial credit for very ineffective because it is one away and on the same side of the scale. But if you chose effective, also one away, but wrong side, you would not receive any credit for that question. So I know it's a little bit confusing, but it's important to keep that in mind, especially as you do practice exams, because understanding where you've got full and partial credit is really important with evaluating your choices.
Okay. So like she said, a little confusing, but do we kind of get that so it's key based, right? And you can get partial or full credit. Is that making some sense? Okay, thumbs up and good. Yes, that's why I wanted to find the video because it's not exactly like straightforward without an explanation like that. So, good. Great, great, great. Okay, so let's screen share again and kind of keep going. So additional questions, feel free as they pop up. Okay. So we'll talk a little bit about registering now. So as we mentioned, you can register on or before March 1st. There's a cost associated with the test unless you have fee assistance. So fee assistance does allow you to get a full tuition waiver, and that's the same with the Casper as well. And then it's likely you'll just take the test once, but you can take it more than once if you need to. You can take it twice in a year and 4 times total. And the scores are released about 30 days automatically to any AAMC MD programs. If you are applying DO or Texas schools, you have to have those scores released, which you can do through when you're registering for the exam. Okay, and then this is just some registration information. So these are testing dates and when you need to register and then when your scores are released. So as I mentioned, the most popular dates do fall in June. So if you want to secure a June date, then you could try to probably register as soon as it's open. May would also be a nice time to take it. If you're working on everything else, you'll be close to finished by then. But really just work whatever works in your schedule. Okay, so who wants you to have the preview? And so, as you probably know and have read, different schools want different things, which I think can be a little confusing. So you do have to check the specific schools you're applying to and to see what you need to take. It's pretty likely at this point that if you're applying to 20 to 30 med, dental, DO schools, that somebody's going to require the preview, right? So it's likely that you would have to take it, but not for sure. Oops. So this QR code right here takes you to a page that gives you a list of schools and it'll tell you if they require this test. Some schools you'll see on that list require a situational judgment test, and basically that means that you can pick if you want to do the preview or the Casper, where others specify we want the preview, we want the Casper. Does that make sense? Yeah. Anybody looked into their schools yet to see what they're going to have to take? Not quite. Maybe right now when you're scanning this QR code. Okay. And so we got a question in the chat about if there's a last date you can take it when applying to the cycle. So, because it's a little bit, it varies by school in terms of like when they will use the results. We want like better safe, right? So I would say the last, like to be very, very safe, the last time to take it would be like the end of June. You can see that there's test dates, like a bunch of test dates after that. And if the medical schools and DO schools aren't reviewing this information until like the secondaries process or later, then that would be fine. But we don't really know that upfront unless they're telling you, of course, unless you can read it on their website or it's part of the application process for the school you're looking at. But otherwise, to be safe, I would say end of June, just so they're able to get those scores in time and that they're reviewing it with the rest of your application and your secondaries. Yeah, so it isn't a lot of test dates. Usually people don't have too bad of a time getting someone asked if it was hard to get the spot you want. People don't have too hard of a time getting a test date because there are a lot within each date because it is proctored at home. But I think again, to be safe, I would try to just register, pick a date now and register for a date right when they open and you should be safe. But I haven't heard of people having too many issues finding one that works. And if you do, you could definitely reach out to Cindy and I about like, oh, I didn't get the first date and my date's later than I thought, just to make sure that that's okay. But there are a lot of spots within the dates as well. Good questions. Okay. And then just some like data points, because I know we all like data points. So 95% of examinees reported that they prepared for the exam. So you're like, oh, okay, so people are prepping for this. But when you look at the next stat, like most people don't spend a lot of time prepping. So the idea here, which we've heard from folks that have created this test at conferences, both tests, is that you can't really study a lot because it's not a content-based test. The study really should include the practice test and materials, right? So the idea that you like know how it's going to be formatted before you get in there is very important. And of course, like based on what we've looked at today, you already have an idea of how it's formatted. So taking a practice test is helpful in the way that like you understand the format, you know what you're going to be asked. Maybe you do a little preparation thinking around like, oh, how would I answer a scenario question and feel confident that you know how to address that before you get to test day. But otherwise, like you're not going to be spending anywhere near the time you spend for your entrance exams studying for this. Okay, and so over 80% of examinees took a practice test and found it useful. And then this small percent, 7%, use materials from a private company. Again, that'd be something we don't recommend. It's not proven to be super helpful. The free materials are shown to be enough to help you do well on the preview. Questions? Okay. Are we ready to move on to the Casper? Yes? Okay, so the Casper is another situational judgment test. It is structured differently, but the main idea is the same, right? So it's assessing your social skills, your ability to be professional, collaborate, your ethics, things of that nature. It does it in a way of more general scenarios. So whereas like the AAMC is really focused on like medical school slash clinical examples, this one is really broad based. They also use the Casper for like a lot of different grad programs. So yeah, it could be a roommate situation, it could be a colleague situation. So it's more like that. So this here is again, I'm sharing resources today. So and what I'll do is I'll while I'm thinking about it, I am going to just grab a link and put it in the chat for you all so you can be looking at this as well. This is a resource. So this is actually a webinar and it's an hour long. So we're not going to watch the whole thing, but I'm going to show you a couple minutes. But it's a great resource for those of you that want to learn more about the Casper. And so definitely I would recommend watching the whole thing when you have some time. You know, even if you're just listening to it while you're doing other things, I think it can be really helpful just so you have a full understanding of the Casper. But let's spend about 5 minutes now kind of allowing them to do like a little bit of an introduction from us. And the Casper was actually created in Canada, so it's they all have Canadian accents, which I love. So it's fun to watch. All right, I'm gonna fast forward just a little.
Everyone, hopefully that's helpful.
Okay.
All right, we are very.
Okay. We'll start right.
Logistics, including how to reserve a test, fees, how score distribution works, test preparation, both technical and how to approach Casper. I'm sure that's going to be a popular one. And finally, we'll end with a bit of a live Q&A. We do have people answering questions that are typed as you submit them, but some of them we might get a chance to answer them live as well. So again, as Nicole mentioned, feel free to submit your questions into the Q&A and we will try to get to as many as we can. I know there are a lot of you here today. All right, so let's start off with Casper. So what exactly is Casper? Casper is an online open response situational judgment test that provides insights about many of the non-technical skills that inform professionalism and social intelligence. So you might be wondering, why do programs care about these sort of things? It's because being socially intelligent and professional, in and out of programs, in the workplace, all those sort of things, it requires a variety of skills and behaviors, which we use basically every time we find ourselves in a new situation. So we'll talk a little bit more about how it works, but at its core, Casper presents you with scenarios and challenging situations, and then it asks questions about how you would respond to them. So Casper assesses a balance of the aspects of social intelligence and professionalism that you see listed on this slide here. These are all skills and behaviors that we draw from whenever we're in a new and challenging situation. One thing that Casper is not a knowledge-based test like the MCAT or the LSAT. So it doesn't require any industry-specific knowledge. They're all supposed to be, hypothetical scenarios that could happen to anyone. Which is why there are also no single correct answers to the scenarios and questions that are presented to you. It's quite open-ended. While the content of each Casper test is unique, the scenarios themselves are carefully selected to ensure that each of those aspects listed on that slide are included. So now let's talk a little bit about what the experience will be like for you. Casper can be taken anywhere as long as you have access to a laptop and desktop computer works as well, and a good internet connection. So you don't have to go to a testing location. We don't have physical testing locations. As of this admission cycle, the Casper test is anticipated to take you about 65 to 85 minutes to complete, and that's including optional breaks. This is a bit of a reduction from the previous year, where it took about 90 to 110 minutes. So a bit of a shorter test this year. As I mentioned before, you'll be presented with a series of real-world hypothetical dilemmas where you demonstrate your abilities and values across different contexts in different ways. So in the test itself, you provide two types of responses, both video responses and typed responses to 11 scenarios. Specifically, there's a video response section where you record responses by video through your webcam and microphone. In there, you will be presented with 2 video-based scenarios, so scenarios where you watch a video, and 2 word-based scenarios. Those are ones where you read a statement, essentially. And those are in completely random order. Then you move on to the typed response section, where you type your responses. And those will have 4 video-based scenarios, so you watch 4 videos, and 3 word-based scenarios. Again, all of those are in completely random order for you. You start off with the video response section first, and once you've finished all those, then you move on to the typed responses. Now, because you're responding through video for those ones, we recommend that you do your best to take the Casper test from a place that's as free from distractions and noise as much as possible, because you'll need to be heard clearly. You probably don't want to be distracted by anything else going on. So ideally, one where you can be a nice private space where you can be alone and take the test like that. And of course, we understand that technical difficulties can happen. So we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But please be assured, you can always reach our live support team by clicking on the chat bubble at the bottom right-hand corner of every page. So let's talk about what's changing this year for people who may have been familiar with Casper from previous years. In the 2025 to 2026 admission cycle, the Casper test will be about 20% shorter. So as I mentioned, about 65 to 85 minutes instead of the previous 90 to 110. The previous test used to have 14 scenarios. Now it's going to have 11 going forward, with 4 video response scenarios and 7 typed scenarios. So typed responses, that's going to be a big change as well. Now, instead of asking you 3 questions, it will ask only 2. So that's a change for the typed section, but there's no change to the number of questions for the video responses, which still ask you 2 questions. To ensure responses continue to be authentic, applicants will have 3.5 minutes to respond to the typed section scenarios, and that's for both questions in total. 3.5 minutes to answer both of those questions. And this is a difference from when you used to have 3 questions and you had 5 minutes. So it's a bit of a proportional change. And for the video response sections, ones where you answer by video, there's no change there. You still have 2 questions, 1 minute for each of those individual questions. And finally, the reason we were able to maintain Casper's psychometrics and even improve its reliability, despite it being shorter, is that raters would now be giving a score for each question. So previously, a score was given for each scenario as a whole, based on how applicants answered all the questions within that scenario. So with this change, that means that Casper will now reflect 22 data points compared to the previous 14 data points. In our study, we found that applicants' total scores differ on average by less than half a point when using this new question level scoring method, as opposed to the previous one. And this is actually not that surprising, given that applicants' quality of response tends to be pretty consistent across questions and scenarios. One other good little note that might be good to mention is that the cost of Casper is not changing this year. And we'll talk about it later, but you can also find the prices for different Casper tests on our dates and fees page.
Okay, so that gave you like a little bit of an introduction for those of you that have never taken Casper before. It's not, the changes aren't really relevant other than it's good for you, right? If you had taken a Casper before, you may notice that more obviously, but it's a shorter test, right? So, and we'll talk about a little bit more about that too. So you can actually register for Casper now. So you are able, like if you Google it and go to their website, you can look and decide, well, you have to sign up first, username, password, all that stuff. Then once you're in there, you can find a date and decide when you want to take it. And this is just some basic information. It's really similar to the preview in terms of you want to take it by, end of June. It takes about a month to get your scores back. There is a difference in cost in terms of like it's $85 for your first 7 schools and then it is additional after that, whereas preview, you pay one fee and it goes to all the schools. So another reason why it's important to like look at what schools actually want it, so you're not spending extra money to say send it to extra schools. So this is my very small font, but inclusive list of this year's MD programs that are asking for the Casper, requiring it. There's also some DO schools not in this list, so definitely do like a double check depending on what you're planning to apply to. But just to give you like an idea of if the school you're hoping to apply to is on this list, just to kind of give you a heads up about that. But all of this information is online and easy to find, so you can do that later as well. Okay, so we talked a little bit about the format. So very different from preview, right? Where it's kind of like the multiple choice type, you just make a selection in the bubble. This is a written response or a video response, right? So as you know, if you have any questions about that as he was talking, you please let me know. But we'll look at some samples as well to give you an idea of what something might look like on the Casper exam. And so the other thing that's good to know about the Casper, and I don't know if it's on here, is that so instead of obviously like in a preview or multiple choice type test, like that's easily graded with like an online tool, right? Whereas this test is actually graded by people. So there are humans grading each of your responses, whether it be video or written, and then giving you a score. And it's a different person that scores every single one of your questions. So that's a little bit different than what we've seen before. Okay, so there's the video-based section. This is when you're recording yourself answering a question. So you'll get a prompt, and with all of these scenarios, you get a role prompt. And so what that means is they'll tell you who you are in this scenario, right? You're a bystander, you're a supervisor, you're a friend. So you'll know how to approach the scenario based on who you are, and that's how you should really see that scenario. And then in both cases of video and written, you get a 30-second reflection. So the timing, I think, can be kind of stressful when you first think about it because it doesn't seem like a lot of time. So it is worth taking the practice test to get the timing down because you don't have a lot of time to reflect and then respond. And you will have a timer on the screen. So if you're like me and you get anxiety from looking at a timer countdown, then you want to practice like having that on your screen in a practice test. So it's not really throwing off your stress while you're in there. And then there's the, So video response, just to finish on that. The Casper expert video we just watched, he mentioned a couple of these things, but just some tips for, good video responses. One of the things like we encourage you to do for mock interviews for med and dental school is to practice yourself by recording yourself on Zoom, like going into a Zoom meeting by yourself, your personal Zoom room, and doing some practice and recording and watching back. It's the same thing here. Practice makes perfect, right? So if you are worried about a video response, like giving yourself time to do that practice, I think is important. And then, of course, emphasizing a quiet setting, feeling like you're in a space where someone's not going to come in your dorm or whatever like that, because that would be really disruptive for not only you, but also the person that is then grading your answer. Okay, so you have video responses and then you have word-based. So word just based means you're reading it, right? So you're reading a scenario and then you're responding. And so you'll get the same 30-second reflection, and then you get 3.5 minutes for 2 typed responses. So let's look at kind of like what a sample might look like. So this page, and I'll drop this in the chat, is very comprehensive. There's lots of information on there here, so I'm just going to scroll us to the bottom for a sample. But just so you have it for reference, I will add it to the chat as well. Okay. So if we go down, so here are some video-based scenarios, and then you can see the 2 questions that you would be asked. So the instructions say watch the full video, and then you will have 3.5 minutes to answer both questions, right? And so you'll be typing in those questions. So we'll just do that as like just to see what it would be like. Another good thing to note is they recommend taking the whole time So don't try to rush this. Take the full 3.5 minutes. And also, they're not going to be grading you based on grammar and spelling. They really are grading based on content. So it's getting your answer in is more important than worrying about your format, grammar, those types of things. So let's look at what a scenario might look like.
I really like working here. It's been good so far. Hi, how can I help you?
Hi, I'd like to return this, please.
Sure. Do you have your receipt?
Unfortunately, I don't, but I definitely bought it from here.
I'm sorry. I can't give you a refund without the receipt. I can give you store credit though.
I really need the cash. My daughter came down with pneumonia, and I need the money to fill her prescription.
I'm sorry. I really wish I could help, but I can't give you a refund without the original receipt.
Can you just make an exception for me this one time?
I just started working here and I would be risking my job.
This is my daughter's health we're talking about. There has to be something you can do for me.
What do you think I should do?
Okay, so kind of like cheesy acting, but you get the sense, right? Of kind of like a basic scenario. This one's group contribution. You can imagine what that would be, and you're welcome to like watch these on your own. But here are the questions to go along with that one. So as a store manager, so you're the store manager, right? They're giving you your position, your role. Would you give this customer a refund? Why or why not? And what I want to highlight here is the why or why not. So the folks that are grading your Casper responses really want to know the why. They want you to have reasoning more than just kind of like a solution or answer. So you really want to emphasize in your short amount of time writing your why. And same here, explain your response. So imagine you decided to refuse a refund. How would you communicate with the customer and explain why, right? Why did you make that decision? Does that make sense for everybody? Kind of what you're looking at? Okay. Pretty straightforward, right? And again, these are more general scenarios rather than medical scenarios. So that is a big difference in the two exams. All right, no questions on that. We'll keep it going. Okay. Sure. Oh, this is just another sample. So sometimes they don't give you a scenario, they actually ask you to describe a situation. So another reason to take a practice exam is to kind of like start thinking about how you may respond to like ethical or conflict situations. So in this case, they're asking you to think of a time when you made a sacrifice in order to accomplish a goal and briefly describe the situation and sacrifice you made. And then imagine that despite the sacrifice, you failed to accomplish this goal. How would you have felt in this situation? And the key here, explain, right? Explain your reasoning. Yeah. Okay, so QR code to prep resources for the Casper, similar to preview. This isn't going to be a lot of studying. It's going to be more around doing the free practice materials. So just aligning yourself with feeling comfortable taking this type of test and answering these types of questions. Okay. So before we have a question in the chat says, are there ideal answers for Casper? And so that there actually are not like correct answers. Certainly, I mean, there's ideal answers, right? But there's not correct answers. It's really about you explaining how you got to your conclusion and your why and having kind of like a balanced approach to answering each scenario question. And when you go into the practice resources, it will tell you a little bit more about that. But because they're open-ended, everyone's answers are going to look a little different. But that's a good question. So it's not like the preview where you are scored, right? As we watched in the video, it's read by someone who's giving you a score based on how you would respond. Okay. And then this is just another note to say, like, you don't need to pay for any extra testing materials. Just use the Casper free ones. So he kind of already talked about this, but a little bit more about like preparing. Once you register for the test, they're gonna like have you go through a bunch, making sure that you have the correct tech you need. Obviously, you need a camera, which most people have these days, but they're gonna make sure you have all that before you get started. Oops, so let's go back. Okay, so we did get a question about are you allowed to take Casper more than once? So yeah, similar to preview, you can take it more than once. Most don't, and most really don't need to. But you can take it more than once in a testing year. Um, I can't remember if there's a limit. Let me check, but it is something you can take more than once. Okay. Yeah, so in one cycle, so the cycle you're all in now, right? You can take it once a cycle. And then they want you to take it again if you go into another cycle of the test. So I'm glad you asked that question so we could clarify, definitely. Um, yeah. Okay, other questions about the Casper? Okay. Anybody have an idea if they have to take the Casper? Maybe? Yes. Okay, both. Yeah. Yeah. Hopefully the takeaway you get from these is most Wellesley students do great. It's usually going to be a plus to your application, and you don't have to spend a lot of time studying. So obviously there's a cost associated, which is, not the most fun thing, but it really isn't going to be super time consuming in comparison to the other things you have going on for the application cycle. So at this point, if you haven't thought about when to take it yet, I think that's the first step is maybe like what makes sense in terms of when to take it that will give me the least amount of stress based on everything else I have going on during this cycle, right? And so for a lot of you that may be June, but it also may be earlier if you have like let's say you're not in class and you have an open time or spring break makes sense for you or think through what the next couple months look like and do what's best for you. Okay. So the last thing I'm just going to mention really quickly, and I know a lot of you have to go, is there's one additional assessment. It's through the same company that has the Casper. It's called the Duet, and it's about aligning mission with program. And so again, this is more general, not specific to medical schools. And there's not a lot of schools that are looking for it right now. But if you're from Texas, there are a few Texas schools, so that's good to know. Otherwise, it's unlikely you'll have to take it this year. But just so you know, it's not, again, this is even less you can study for. It's 15 minutes. It's aligning like what values are important to you with schools. So there's no right answers. There's no study methods. I'll show you a sample. So like this could be so if you're doing this mission alignment, you may say, okay, excellence in teaching is important to me, serving the underserved, and then you kind of scale it. And that's really it. So it's a matter of like letting them know what mission or what values are important to you. But like I said, if you're not applying to, I think, two Texas schools that want it, or possibly DO schools, then you don't really have to worry about this one. But I just want to let you know that it does exist, and in the future, maybe peers may be taking that one as well. Okay, so I want to leave time for questions. So any other questions that are coming up about situational judgment tests? Okay, cool. If you keep thinking, as you do, I want to go back real quick just to remind you, I would sign up for, sorry, this is like head spinning. I would sign up for this preparation webinar if you can, right? So follow the QR code and sign up for that. That's offered right through the AAMC. And then when you get a chance, I would go through the rest of that webinar we started from Casper, from the experts that have created it. And that was the one that we watched about 5 minutes just to get the rest of the context around that, if that's something you need to do. And then, of course, I mean, looking up your schools and school lists and seeing what they're asking for. And then you can always reach out to Cindy and I if you're unclear about if you should be taking one of these and which one. Sound good? I'm going to stop screen sharing for just a minute. Other questions?